Everyone saw the boulders, but no one knew just how much danger they'd placed us in until it was nearly too late. They called it Harmony Creek Estates. Peaceful name, right? It was supposed to be. Birds chirping, fresh-cut lawns, porch swings. But for most of us, that was just brochure fiction, because Harmony Creek wasn't run by reason. It was run by one woman's ego, and it nearly cost us everything. My name's Jack. I'm a volunteer firefighter. 15 years in, I've pulled people out of burning homes, crashed cars, collapsing buildings. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the slow, creeping insanity of dealing with one woman named Karen. Yes, that Karen, our HOA president. Imagine someone gave a dictator a golf cart, a clipboard, and free rein over your front yard. That's Karen. She patrolled like a self-crowned queen, her little cart, fittingly named the Enforcer, zipping from house to house, not to help, but to inspect, and fine, and threaten. Last week, she fined my buddy Dave for coiling his garden hose counterclockwise. Apparently that was visually disruptive. A new violation added quietly to the bylaws. Subsection parrot, if you can. Believe it. Uncle Vince, he's not really my uncle, just a retired jazz drummer with a fondness for plastic flamingos, got slapped with a notice because Bartholomew, one of his flamingos, was leaning at an unapproved angle. His response? He glued a little witch hat on Bartholomew and hung a sign that said, "Curses on petty tyrants." Karen fined him again for the hat, the sign, and the original flamingo lean. Of course. Every newsletter she sent out, printed on thick cardstock that probably cost more than my monthly water bill, came laced with the same phony cheer. "Welcome to another season of beautification at Harmony Creek." Translation: prepare to suffer. It wasn't enough to control mailboxes, now required to be grage, a cursed mix of gray and beige, or dictate flower box colors, red petunias only, pink is apparently criminal, or install solar path lights. So dim they were better at highlighting snails than helping you avoid the curb. No, Karen wanted everything to match her idea of harmony, even if it made the neighborhood a nightmare to live in. And then she came for the road. There's this one lane in our neighborhood. Whispering Pines. It's not whispering. It's barely wide enough for two cars to pass without holding their breath. But it's our main artery. The quickest route into the back of Harmony Creek, and most importantly, our fire engine's primary access during emergencies. Engine 12 is a beast, big, heavy, purpose-built to save lives, but it needs space to breathe. Without that lane, we lose precious minutes, minutes that mean life or death. When Karen announced a natural elegance improvement to Whispering Pines, I felt it in my gut. That sinking, gnawing anxiety that something stupid and dangerous was coming, and it did. A flatbed truck pulled in one gray Friday morning. Rain threatened, air heavy. I watched from a distance, that gnawing feeling growing into full-blown dread. Then I saw them. Two boulders, not stones. Not landscaping rocks, boulders the size of small SUVs, dumped right into the narrowest curve of Whispering Pines Lane, one on each side, creating a choke point so tight you couldn't fit a lawnmower through, let alone a fire engine. I stared, stunned, and Karen? She was thrilled. She stood there in a pink hard hat, clipboard in hand, directing landscapers like she was building the Taj Mahal. "A little to the left with that fern, darling," she chirped. People gathered, angry, confused. But Karen had her script ready. "This," she announced, gesturing with a self-satisfied smile, "is our new traffic calming and rustic charm enhancement feature. Someone asked how the garbage trucks were supposed to get through, or the ambulances." Karen waved her hand. "Oh, Harold, please, they'll manage. It just takes finesse." That's when I stepped forward. I kept my voice calm, professional. I'd been here before. Fires, panic, screaming. I knew how to keep a lid on pressure. "Karen," I said, "as a firefighter, I'm telling you, Engine 12 won't fit through. Here. This is dangerous." She smiled at me, that smile that makes your skin crawl. "Perhaps your little red truck needs to learn new maneuvers," she said. "This has been approved by the HOA Architectural Review Committee. Of course it had." She chaired the committee. I didn't back down. This is a safety hazard. If someone's house catches fire back here, we won't get to them in time. Others murmured agreement. Some even nodded. But Karen's grip was tight. Her eyes narrowed. "You're welcome to file a formal grievance through the proper channels," she snapped. "But the boulders stay." And stay they did. The next day, violation notices appeared. For me. For Dave. For anyone who dared question her. Mine was for public disputation of an approved beautification initiative. Dave's? Inciting skepticism. Yes, really. We weren't just residents anymore. We were enemies of the state. But we weren't done. I filed a formal safety complaint with the fire marshal, sent photos, diagrams. I even CC'd the town council. Karen must have sensed the walls closing in, so she pushed back harder. A new newsletter landed, glossy, gushing. "Dad, Sentinels of Serenity," she called the boulders. She even added fake testimonials. "We love our new calming stones." Anonymous resident. I bet she wrote them herself. That was when Uncle Vince escalated. He lined up his flamingos around the boulders in a silent protest, gave them little helmets, called them load-bearing flamingos. Karen lost it. Improper. "Flamingo attire!" she shrieked. She fined him again, but then it got worse. The garbage truck stopped coming. Delivery drivers refused to enter. Residents had to walk packages from the main road, some nearly a quarter mile in the rain. Karen's response? A form letter. Shared community responsibility, she called it. But no one shared her vision anymore. The fire marshal sent a letter, a polite inquiry about the obstruction. Karen fired back with zoning laws and legalese, probably drafted by some overpriced HOA attorney we paid for. It was like punching smoke. The boulders didn't move, but the danger grew until the night someone almost died. Mr. Abernathy, 72, a heart attack. The ambulance got stuck. The crew had to run in, gear on their backs. Minutes lost. He survived, barely. When confronted, Karen didn't apologize. She blamed him. Perhaps if Mr. Abernathy had maintained a healthier lifestyle, she said, adjusting her pearl necklace, such unfortunate incidents could be avoided. The silence was deafening. Even her supporters looked ashamed. Dave just shook his head. She's gone. And she was. Gone from reason, gone from empathy. All that remained was her throne of HOA forms and her monument of stone. That was when I realized this wasn't just about rules or landscaping anymore. This was war, and we were all living on the front lines. What defines real justice? Is it the slow grind of paperwork and signatures? Or is it standing up when no one else will, even if you have to do it alone? After the ambulance delay, the neighborhood changed. You could feel it. People stopped waving. They glanced over their shoulders more. Conversations at the mailbox became whispers. No one wanted to be the next person Karen punished, because she was punishing people, anyone who raised their voice. Her campaign of control turned colder, sharper. Fines arrived with no warnings. Sidewalk chalk was now graffiti. Feeding squirrels was unauthorized wildlife catering. A basketball hoop? Visually non-compliant recreational equipment. It was like living in a HOA police state. And Karen had become the high priestess of petty. But she wasn't content with just obedience. She wanted submission, and when Mrs. Rodriguez, a single mom with 2 small kids, dared to speak out after Mr. Abernathy's heart scare, she got hit the hardest. Her daughter's chalk drawings? Gone? Her tomato patch? Non-conforming landscaping. Her laughter, yes, actual children's laughter, was fined for violating designated quiet hours, Saturday afternoons. The cruelty wasn't hidden anymore. It was weaponized. She came to me crying one afternoon, shoulders trembling, holding a stack of violation slips like they were eviction papers. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I can't afford to move, but I can't stay like this." Her voice broke something inside me. I've seen people cry before, after fires, accidents, but this wasn't from loss. It was from fear, and that was worse. Karen wasn't just an HOA president anymore. She was a bully with legal backing, and the community was cracking under her thumb. I talked to Dave that night, sat on my back porch, beer in hand, while somewhere down the street, someone grilled burgers with illegal seasoning. We didn't laugh about it anymore. "She's out of control," I said, "and no one's stopping her." "We can stop her," he replied, "but not the way you want to." He meant my temper, my need to act. "You want justice?" he said. "Then we do this smart." So we started digging. We pulled HOA meeting minutes, the financial reports, what little she allowed to be seen. And the deeper we looked, the more things didn't add up. Big expenses under vague names, community aesthetic enhancements, rustic harmony projects, the landscaping company that placed the boulders, rock-solid landscaping solutions. LLC sounded legit until we found out it was a P.O. box. Its only registered officer? A woman named Karen Pebble. Yeah, Pebble. Subtle, right? Digging further, Dave traced Karen Pebble's address to a relative of Karen's, her Aunt Mildred, out of state. Probably didn't know what a landscaping invoice looked like. That's when the questions turned into suspicions. Was Karen paying herself? Was our HOA president using community funds for fake projects and funneling the money into her own account? We didn't have proof, not enough to bring it public. And not enough to go to the authorities without risking Karen suing us for defamation, something we knew she'd do in a heartbeat. We needed a smoking gun, and then Uncle Vince, glorious, bizarre Uncle Vince, found it. He was doing field work, as he called it, trying to prove Karen's rose bushes were harboring subversive aphids. Armed with a magnifying glass and a pocket notebook, he snuck up to her recycling bin to observe the insect ecosystem. What he found was better than bugs, an envelope, torn, half crumpled, from a company called Exquisite Exterior Designs, inside an invoice. Consultation, Whispering Pines boulder placement aesthetics. The charge? Thousands. Enough to repave the entire neighborhood. But here's the kicker. The remittance slip was made out directly to a personal account. Karen's Vince, bless his heart, thought the roses were a front for fish schemes. He handed us the envelope like a kid presenting. A frog to the class. Dave and I just stared. It wasn't everything. But it was the first real piece of evidence, hard, physical, a direct connection between HOA money and Karen's bank account. Now it wasn't just a question of safety, it was corruption. And Karen must have sensed it, because cameras started going up. Not just near the clubhouse, but on lampposts, aimed down sidewalks, pointed directly at homes like mine, like Vince's, like Mrs. Rodriguez's. It was intimidation. No other word for it. You dig too deep, she was saying. I'll bury you. But it didn't scare me. It made me angry. The firefighter in me, the one trained to run toward danger, flared up. This wasn't some abstract civic issue. This was a woman using her power to crush anyone who got in her way. And she didn't care who got hurt. We had enough evidence to be dangerous, but not enough to win. So we waited and watched. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she fined Vince for excessive gnome deployment. 37 gnomes, all arranged in a silent protest facing Karen's house. Their tiny fists raised. He got fined by the gnome. Per gnome. And Vince? He didn't pay. He framed the violation notice and called it his finest art piece yet. Still, even through the absurdity, the pressure built. Every day those boulders sat there was another chance someone could die, and every second Karen stayed in power was a risk to all of us. Then one night, it was 2:14 a.m., I was at the station, on overnight duty, most of the crew asleep. I was reading another boring memo about Jose folding techniques when the alarm dropped. Station 12, structure fire, 3 alarm. 112 Whispering Pines Lane. I froze. Whispering Pines. The boulders. My heart thudded like a war drum as I jumped into my gear. Lights flashed. Sirens screamed. Engine 12 roared to life. We were the first due on scene, and we all knew we wouldn't make it through those rocks. Captain. Mike's voice cut through the cab. That's the one with the decorations, right, Jack? Yeah, Cap, I said. Big ones. Right in the damn way. We hit the bend. The headlights caught the sentinels of Serenity, and they looked even bigger in the dark. Marco, riding officer, leaned forward. No room. Mike keyed the radio. Calm, controlled. Engine 12 to command. Obstruction at Whispering Pines, decorative boulders, unable to proceed without contact. Requesting permission to mitigate obstruction. A pause. Then the reply. Command. To Engine 12. Confirmed structure fire. You are cleared to mitigate. In firefighter speak, crush them. Hang on, Mike shouted. He downshifted, grit his teeth, and slammed forward. The engine groaned. Metal screamed. Stone cracked. I braced against the dashboard as 20 tons of steel bullied its way through Karen's masterpiece. One boulder shifted, the other cracked in half. We didn't stop. We couldn't. And just as we cleared the wreckage, she appeared. Karen. Hair. In curlers. Silk robe glowing pink under the flashing lights. Face twisted in rage. She was filming. You'll pay for this, you vandals. You're destroying community property. But then the radio crackled again. Update. Confirmed fire location. 112 Whispering Pines. Homeowner is the original. Caller. Repeat. The fire is at the complainant's address. I blinked. Turned. Marco's mouth dropped. Jack, he said. That's Karen's house. Right on cue. A soft orange glow lit up the night behind her, flames rising. licking at the expensive cedar siding she'd boasted about in 6 separate newsletters. She stopped yelling. Her phone fell from her hand, and for the first time since she moved in, Karen was speechless. Flames were climbing higher now, angry fingers of fire curling up the walls of Karen's pristine Grage Colonial, licking across her carefully color-matched trim, devouring it all without hesitation. This was no slow smolder. It was a full-blown inferno. From where I stood, heart-pounding, turnout gear heavy, the cracked remnants of her stupid boulders behind me, I could see it clear as day. The side of her house was already engulfed. Smoke rolled into the sky, thick and black. Windows cracked from the heat, one by one, sounding like gunshots in the chaos. Karen didn't move. Her face, seconds ago twisted with fury, was frozen. Eyes wide, mouth slack. Her silk robe shimmered in the emergency lights, but her expression was bare, stripped, unprotected. I've seen shock before. But this wasn't just shock, it was realization. It hit her like the fire itself. Her boulders, her sentinels of serenity, they had just blocked her own rescue, and now the flames were coming for her house. Fast. Then suddenly, she broke. My babies, she sobbed. My babies are inside. At first I didn't understand. But then she screamed it. Louder, panicked, desperate. Peaches, Prancer, my dogs, please, someone has to get them. The words hit me hard. She wasn't crying about her imported Italian tile. Not her designer throw pillows or the 12-piece porcelain owl collection she once bragged about at a meeting. It was her dogs, her tiny, yapping, over-pampered, purse-sized Pomeranians, Peaches and Prancer. It was absurd, surreal, but also, strangely, human. I didn't like her. None of us did. But in that moment, she wasn't the HOA tyrant. She was just a woman, begging, crying, shaking. Terror makes people equal. Fire even more so. Captain Mike turned to me, quick and sharp. Jack, you and Miller, primary search. Get to that second floor. Street-side bedroom. That's likely where she means. I nodded. Mask on, axe in hand, heart pounding. We moved. The front door was a furnace. Paint peeling. Smoke pouring from the cracks. One solid kick from Miller's steel boot, and it gave way, releasing a wall of choking black air and blistering heat. We dropped low, crawled. The roar of the fire swallowed everything. The house moaned like it knew it was dying. Up the stairs, each step a risk. The wood creaked, groaned. The heat was worse on the second floor. Oppressive, the kind that presses on your chest, crawls under your helmet. Your instincts scream to turn back. But instincts don't get a vote. Not when there's life on the line. Bedroom left, I shouted. My voice muffled under the mask. We kicked through the door. It was already burning. Flames rolled across the ceiling. The bed was half gone. Mattress springs glowing like twisted red wire. Nothing here, Miller called out. But then, faint. Barely there. A yelp. I froze. There, I pointed. A side room, dressing room, office? Who knows? I tested the doorknob. Warm but not searing. I shoved the door open, and there they were, 2 tiny fluff balls, shaking, covered in soot, whimpering under a lace-draped vanity. Peaches, Prancer, terrified but alive. Got 'em! I shouted. I scooped them up, one under each arm. They were light. Fragile, hearts hammering against my gloves. Now we just had to get out, but the hallway behind us, flames were starting to eat through the ceiling. Move! Miller shouted. We ducked, ran. The stair railings splintered as we Hit it. Smoke wrapped around us, thick and hot, and I felt one of the dogs try to twist in my grip. "Not today, Prancer," I grunted. We burst out the front door, just as the ceiling inside gave way. We hit the lawn, gasping, coughing. Karen saw us. Her eyes widened. "Peaches! Prancer!" She dropped to her knees as I handed the dogs over, held them close, hugged them like they were children. She was sobbing. Sobbing like I'd never imagined she could. Gratitude, guilt, shock. It was all there. And suddenly, the fire, the politics, the HOA rules, all of it felt suspended. Just for a second. This was the real Karen, stripped of power, of pretense, just a woman clutching the only things that mattered to her, but we didn't have time for reflection. "Pour the water to it," Mike shouted. We turned the hose back on the flames. Thousands of gallons hit the walls of her burning house, shattered windows, collapsing eaves. The water turned to steam instantly, rising like a ghost from the ruin. Her dream home, toasted, her designer drapes, gone, the imported rugs, floating. I looked around at the wreckage. The lawn was covered in hoses, the driveway stained with soot, and just behind it all, the twisted remains of her damn boulders. Irony, I thought, has a cruel sense of timing. Hours passed. By dawn, the fire was out. The house, partially saved, structurally intact, but the inside, wrecked. Her empire of curated perfection was a soggy, blackened shell. Karen sat on the curb, a blanket around her shoulders. Her hair frizzed and gray with ash, the dog still in her arms. Silent. And then something happened that none of us saw coming. The police approached her. "Ma'am, we need your phone, the one you were using to film the fire department as they approached." Karen blinked, confused. "Why?" "It's evidence," the officer said, "of obstruction. The video confirms that you delayed emergency responders." She didn't speak, didn't argue. She just handed it over. That was the beginning of the end. The fire marshal filed formal obstruction charges that morning. The town removed what was left of the boulders immediately, and the HOA's insurance company, they refused to pay for the damage to Engine 12, said the boulders were unapproved. That repair bill? It landed squarely in Karen's lap. 5 figures. No escape. But the fallout didn't stop there. The financial documents Dave and I had collected, the invoice from Exquisite Exterior Designs, the Pebble connection, all of it suddenly became very interesting to official investigators. We gave it to them, every copy, every receipt. Every odd shell company, Karen had tried to silence us with fines, but she'd accidentally set fire to her own castle, and now the kingdom was collapsing. The HOA board, shell-shocked and embarrassed, called an emergency meeting 2 days later. It was over in 15 minutes. A new bylaw passed unanimously. All emergency access routes must remain permanently clear. No obstructions. No exceptions. Gerald, the HOA's timid treasurer, was the one who seconded it. Turns out, even he'd had enough. Karen was removed from her position. The woman who had terrorized us with ruler-length lawn inspections and mailbox color mandates was finally dethroned. Was it justice? Maybe. It wasn't a trial or a public shaming. There was no big speech, no dramatic collapse, just a quiet, exhausted unraveling. And then, a few weeks later, she came to me. She was dressed simply. Jeans, hoodie, no clipboard, no glare. She held out an envelope. "For the fire department," she said softly. "A donation. We're selling the house. Moving." I nodded, didn't speak. What was there to say? She turned. Peaches and Prancer waddled beside her. As she walked away down the newly cleared Whispering Pines lane, I exhaled for the first time in months. And for the first time in forever, Harmony Creek was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels earned. Everyone kept asking the same question. Now that she's gone, what happens next? You'd think the answer would be easy. Relief, celebration, a sense of freedom. And in a way, it was. But the truth? The real truth? After the Queen fell, Harmony Creek didn't feel victorious. It felt quiet. Too quiet. Like after a storm when the birds haven't come back yet. The boulders were gone. The fines stopped. The cameras were taken down. But the tension didn't vanish with them. Because when someone rules by fear, their absence leaves something behind. A shape in the air. A habit in your bones. People still walked past the HOA clubhouse like they expected, to be scolded. Neighbors still whispered at the mailbox like the cameras might still be watching. And some folks, especially the ones who'd sided with Karen, didn't know what to do with their shame. It turns out, living under control changes you, even when the controller is gone. Dave put it best one afternoon when we were sitting on my porch, watching his grill char a couple of illegal seasoned burgers. It's like she moved out, he said, but left her echo behind. He wasn't wrong. And that echo, well, it didn't disappear overnight. The new board tried. Really, they did. They slashed half the ridiculous bylaws. The mailbox color war ended. Gnome protests were decriminalized. And someone finally rewrote the community newsletter without 17 exclamation marks and fake testimonials. But some wounds were deeper, like the scar on Engine 12's bumper, or the look on Mrs. Rodriguez's face when she found out Karen had filed formal complaints against her parenting with child services. It didn't go anywhere, thank God, but the damage? It lingered. I visited her a few days later. She was planting fresh tomatoes again, hands covered in dirt, a smile trying to come back to her face. I think we're staying, she said quietly. The kids asked if the street was safe now. I told them yes. That stuck with me. Is the big street safe now? It's not a question about traffic or fences. It's a question about people and how much power we let them hold over our lives. Uncle Vince, of course, bounced back immediately. He announced the first annual Freedom from Karen block party, complete with unpermitted gnome parades, flamingo obstacle courses, and a community suggestion box titled Worst HOA Rule You Can Think Of. His opening entry, All lawns must be waxed weekly and display seasonal haikus. He followed it with a drawing of a squirrel wearing aviators titled Gary, the HOA resistance leader. It was absurd. It was perfect. The party was beautiful chaos. Kids ran wild. Dogs barked. Music blared past the previously illegal decibel threshold. Dave's grill smoked like it had a vendetta. And for the first time in a long time, the laughter didn't feel like it needed permission. I remember standing at the edge of it all, watching neighbors talk to each other without fear. Without clipboard glances or muttered fines. That's when I saw her, Karen. She didn't walk through the party, didn't stop to talk. She stood at the far edge of the street, just outside the crowd. No clipboard, no robe, no power suit, just jeans, a plain jacket, and two little Pomeranians sitting quietly at her feet, Peaches and Prancer. Someone saw her. Someone whispered. I watched the ripple spread, eyes turning, tension rising. And then it just stopped. She didn't come closer. She just stood there, holding something in her hand. An envelope. She waited until I noticed, then slowly walked over, avoiding. Every lawn like it still mattered. "Jack," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost small. "I wanted to say thank you. Again. For saving them. And the house. Even after everything." She paused, then held out the envelope. "For the department?" she added. "Just a donation. I know it's not enough." I didn't take it right away because, honestly, I didn't know if I wanted to. But then I saw her eyes. No fire, no ego. Just something heavy. Exhausted. I took the envelope. She nodded. "We're selling. We leave next week." "Where will you go?" I asked. She hesitated. "Somewhere I don't have to be in charge." That actually sounded sincere. She turned to leave, but then stopped and said something I'll never forget. "I thought control would make things perfect. But I think I just wanted to not feel powerless. I made everything about rules because rules felt safe, but it was never about safety. It was about fear. Mine. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She gave a small nod and walked away. Her dogs trotting beside her down the newly repaved road she'd once nearly killed to control. I watched her go, watched her vanish around the bend, and I wondered, was this remorse or just surrender? It didn't matter. She was gone, and the street really did feel safe now. But the thing no one tells you about justice, it doesn't always end with punishment. Sometimes it ends with silence. Sometimes with a tired woman walking away, and sometimes with a firefighter standing on a porch. Finally, breathing easy again. A few days later, the fire department got a check. A big one. Anonymous. But the handwriting on the envelope matched Karen's. The department used it to fix the damage to engine 12. Every time I see that truck now, I remember the night we drove through stone to save a house we couldn't stand. And I remember why we did it. Not because she deserved it, but because that's what we do. Justice isn't just sirens and consequences. It's crawling through a burning house for two yappy dogs because someone has to. It's filing reports, collecting receipts, and exposing corruption one signature at a time. It's listening to someone apologize, even if it comes years too late, and it's knowing, deep down, that no matter how heavy the boulders someone places in your way, you keep moving because lives are at stake, because people matter, even when they forget that themselves. Harmony Creek found its breath again. The lawns grew a little wild. The wind chimes returned, and the flamingos, they marched. Freedom had a shape now. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was ours. Why is it that silence feels louder after chaos? You'd think with Karen gone, Harmony Creek would snap back to normal. That people would breathe easier, laugh louder, walk lighter. And for a while, they did. But something had changed. Something deeper. Because when you've been afraid of someone for that long, when every flower pot, wind chime, and garden gnome was a battleground, it takes more than one meeting and a new mailbox color to heal what's underneath. Some neighbors were still looking over their shoulders. Others were waiting for the next Karen, because control like that doesn't just evaporate. It leaves behind habits, reflexes, and scars. Take Gerald, the HOA treasurer. Before all this, he was the quiet one. The guy who wore socks with sandals and took 10 minutes to say good morning. He used to flinch when Karen entered a room. You could see the tension in his shoulders when she spoke, like he was trying not to breathe too loud. After her fall, he was one of the first to step up, not out of ambition, out of guilt. "I should have said something," he told me once, nervously adjusting his glasses. "I knew something was off with the finances. I just didn't want to be targeted." That guilt ate at him. He started reviewing every past HOA expense line by line, even the ones that weren't his responsibility anymore. Not to punish, but to understand, to atone. The new HOA board didn't just want transparency, they wanted trust. But trust doesn't come with a vote, it comes with action. That's why, 3 weeks after the fire, we all got an invite in our mailboxes. Community. Reset meeting. It wasn't glossy, no cardstock, no fake testimonials, just a plain letter, simple font, signed by Gerald, Uncle Vince, and Mrs. Rodriguez. And at the bottom, in shaky pen, "Let's rebuild together." The meeting was held at the clubhouse, and this time, people came, not out of fear, but out of hope. I stood in the back, just watching, listening. There were ideas, real ones, fixing the sidewalks, replanting trees Karen had ordered removed because they dropped leaves on decorative surfaces, installing actual lighting, not the dollar store solar ones she insisted on because they were ambiance compliant. Mrs. Gable, who used to be fined for feeding squirrels, proposed a small community garden. Uncle Vince offered to donate flamingos as garden guardians. There was laughter, real laughter. But then, something happened that pulled us all back down. A man stood up. I didn't recognize him. Tall, neatly dressed, older, sharp eyes. "My name's Russell," he said. "New resident. Bought Karen's house." That got attention. He continued. Calm, controlled. "I'm a retired prosecutor. I moved here for peace, serenity, and I like rules. Not tyranny, rules, structure. Because without it, communities fall apart." A few people nodded, hesitantly. But what happened here, what Karen did, wasn't about structure. It was about control. That's the difference. He paused, then looked around. "I'm not here to stir anything, but I do think we need to decide right now who we are without her. Are we a community that replaces one tyrant with another, or one that learns how to lead together?" The room was silent, and then Gerald spoke. Quietly. "We're not perfect, but we're trying." Russell nodded. That's all anyone can ask. It was a small moment, but it mattered, because the real damage Karen left behind wasn't just legal or financial. It was emotional. She taught people that speaking up was dangerous, that questioning meant punishment, that rules were more important than reason. Undoing that takes time. Still, Harmony Creek was trying. The mailboxes stayed grage, but the fines stopped. Gnomes got a designated protest zone, officially dubbed the Lawn of Liberty. The Sentinels of Serenity, the Boulders, well, their remnants, were turned into a rock garden by the playground. A plaque read, "In memory of obstruction," and the lesson it taught us all. Even Dave softened. "I never thought I'd say this," he told me one evening, flipping his now famous unapproved burgers. "But I kinda miss the drama." I raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" He shrugged. "Not her. But the purpose, the fight, it felt important. I got it. When you spend months pushing against something, it becomes your rhythm, your reason. When it's Gone, you feel the emptiness, but sometimes emptiness is space, and space can be filled with something better, like neighbors helping each other rebuild a porch, or Mrs. Rodriguez starting weekend art classes for kids, the chalk kind, like Uncle Vince launching a neighborhood podcast called No Mercy, Tales from the HOA Trenches, or like me, walking Whispering Pines Lane without that cold knot in my stomach. That night, I walked the length of the road, past the corner where the fire truck had scraped through stone, past the house that had once ruled the neighborhood with garden ordinances and fear. Karen's house, empty now, for sale sign still out front. The paint was faded. The porch sagged slightly. The flower beds, once pristine, had been claimed by dandelions, and yet something about it looked softer, less threatening, like the house itself had exhaled. I stood there for a moment, just breathing, remembering, the fire, the dogs, the scream, the wreckage, and the woman, Karen. Was she gone for good? Had she learned anything? Would we ever really know? Probably not. But the truth? She wasn't the story anymore. The story now was us. A neighborhood that had been broken, healing. A community that had been divided, reconnecting. A group of people who'd once been too scared to speak, now choosing to listen. That's what Karen never understood. Power can be seized, but trust has to be earned, and that's what Harmony Creek was finally beginning to do, one small step at a time. You'd think fire would be the end of the story. You'd think smoke and sirens would be the climax. But fire doesn't just destroy, it reveals. And sometimes, it uncovers things that were buried long before the flames ever started. Karen may have walked away from Harmony Creek, but the mess she left behind hadn't gone anywhere. Her name was gone from HOA newsletters. Her golf cart, the infamous Enforcer, sat abandoned at the maintenance shed like a relic from a fallen empire. But in the town clerk's office, in the fire marshal's files, and deep in a basement box of Gerald's that smelled like forgotten taxes, Karen was still very much alive. Not as a person, as a question, one that no one could quite answer. What had she really done with the money? We knew about the fake invoices, the shell companies, the envelope Uncle Vince had found. But suspicion isn't proof. And suspicion doesn't scare people like Karen. She hadn't been arrested. Not yet. No charges had been filed because the town wanted more than a crumpled slip and a company registered to a P.O. box. They wanted undeniable, and so did I, because something about it still itched at the back of my mind. Dave and I sat on my porch late one night, the air thick with early summer heat and the scent of rebellion burgers. He flipped one with mechanical precision and stared into the flames. "She's not stupid," he said finally. "Arrogant, cruel, but not dumb." I nodded. "She covered her tracks. Maybe not all of them." That's when he pulled out a flash drive and dropped it in my lap. "What is this?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Everything I couldn't get before. Financial records, backups, meeting minutes. Someone leaked it to me, anonymously. Said it was time." "Someone?" I raised an eyebrow. "Gerald," he said. "Probably, but maybe not. Doesn't matter." I stared at the drive. It was unassuming, plain, just a chunk of plastic and metal. But it might be the fuse. The one thing that could light the trail Karen had tried so hard to bury. We plugged it in that night. Laptop humming. Mosquitoes buzzing outside like nosy neighbors. At first, it was what we expected. Invoices, budgets, memos. But then, Dave leaned in. Wait. He clicked. And there it was. An email. Subject line. Pebble proposal follow-up. Attached was an unsigned contract between the HOA and Rock Solid Landscaping Solutions, LLC. The signature line? Blank. But the footer had a routing number. One we didn't recognize. Until Dave cross-referenced it, it matched the same account listed on the envelope Vince had pulled from Karen's trash. Her personal account. Got you, Dave whispered. We had the link now. The HOA's funds were being routed into an account that, according to bank databases, was not registered to Rock Solid Landscaping. It was registered to Karen J. Eldridge. Her real name. Her real account. Buried in metadata, forgotten in her own arrogance. It was enough. Enough to go to the town, to the state, to the authorities. We handed it all over. Every file, every cross-reference, every breadcrumb. The fire marshal's office reopened their inquiry. The HOA insurance adjuster launched a separate fraud investigation. And Harmony Creek waited. Weeks passed, then months. And during that time, the silence returned. But it wasn't fearful. It was watchful. We were waiting for justice to do what justice does, slowly, reluctantly, but hopefully, surely. It was early September when we got the news. I was driving back from the station, still in uniform, when my phone buzzed. A text from Dave. It's happening. Karen had been arrested. Fraud. Embezzlement. Filing false HOA expenditures. All confirmed. The total? Over $86,000 siphoned through fake vendors, inflated consulting fees, and made-up beautification projects. The boulders? Just the tip of the glacier. Turns out, exquisite exterior designs had been billing for community harmony assessments and aesthetic conflict resolution consultations. What did that mean? Nothing. It meant money laundering. And we finally had the proof. It hit the local news that night. Her mugshot wasn't the Karen we remembered. No smirk, no pearls. No enforcer cap. Just a woman staring blankly at a future she no longer controlled, and somehow it didn't feel triumphant. It felt sad. Because somewhere beneath the ego and the arrogance, there had been a woman who wanted order. But she chose power instead, and now she was losing everything. The charges were real, the trial was coming. And Harmony Creek? We gathered again. Same clubhouse, same folding chairs. But something was different this time. The fear was gone. This wasn't about rebellion anymore. It was about rebuilding. Gerald stood at the front, hands shaking only slightly now. We've been through a lot, he said. But tonight we close that chapter, and we start a new one. People clapped, not loudly, but honestly. I looked around and saw faces I hadn't seen smile in years. Mrs. Rodriguez sat beside her kids, who were coloring quietly with sidewalk chalk on the floor. Inside, where no one could find them, Uncle. Vince wore a flamingo print tie and a pin that said, "Defund the Sentinels." Dave leaned over to me. You think she saw this coming? I shook my head. She thought she'd always be in charge. But she wasn't, he said. Not really. No, I agreed. She just made everyone afraid to say otherwise. But fear has a shelf life, and hers had expired. Karen's trial was set for late fall. The town prepared its case. The new HOA board froze her remaining accounts. The community's funds, what was left, were being audited. And one day, I passed her old house again. It had been sold, not to another tyrant. To a couple with twin toddlers, a dog that looked like a mop, and a love for wind chimes. The mailbox, painted bright yellow. No one complained. Harmony Creek wasn't perfect, but it was no longer afraid. And sometimes, that's the greatest kind of justice. Not the courtroom kind, the quiet kind, where peace doesn't have to be demanded, where no one rules with threats or fines, where laughter doesn't come with a warning notice. That's what we fought for, and that's what we finally got. We thought it was over. She was out of the neighborhood, out of power, out of moves. But Karen was never one to leave the stage without a final monologue. Her trial was scheduled for November. The town had built its case. The financial proof was overwhelming. The testimonies were lined up, residents, board members, even Gerald, shaking slightly as he practiced his statement in front of his bathroom mirror. Everything pointed to closure. But Karen didn't believe in closure. She believed in control, and in the weeks before her court date, we all started to feel it. Little things, old residents getting letters from her lawyer, not subpoenas, warnings, thinly veiled threats about defamation. Suggestions to reconsider participating in this frivolous and vindictive legal overreach. Mrs. Gable got one, so did Dave. Even Uncle Vince, who framed his letter and hung it above his toilet under the label, "Flushing the Past." But it wasn't funny. It was pressure. It was Karen's last weapon. Fear. And for a few people, it worked. 2 witnesses dropped out, cited stress. A third refused to hand over her financial correspondence with the HOA, afraid of a countersuit. Karen wasn't trying to win. She was trying to muddy the waters, create enough doubt, enough static, enough fear to make the system blink. I remember walking through Whispering Pines one foggy morning, the air damp and still. The trees hung heavy over the curve where the boulders used to be. The road was clean now, rebuilt, but the shadows were long, and it hit me. We hadn't won yet. We were still in it, still fighting something bigger than rules or bylaws. We were fighting the residue of power, because Karen might have lost her title, her home, and her boulders. But she still knew how to make people feel small. That night, I met with Dave, Gerald, and Mrs. Rodriguez. We sat around my kitchen table, papers and coffee mugs scattered like war maps. "We have to respond," Dave said. "Legally, publicly, something." Gerald looked exhausted. "She's dragging everyone down with her." "No," I said. "She's trying to, but this time, she's doing it from the outside." That mattered. Karen no longer had the HOA. She no longer had her clipboard, her power, her stage. She was throwing rocks from the cheap seats, and we had a choice. Either let her rattle us again, or remind her that Harmony Creek didn't belong to her anymore. So we wrote a letter, one letter, signed by 47 residents, posted publicly and submitted to the town and court. It didn't attack her. It didn't insult. It told the truth about the fear, about the fines, about the obstruction, about the fire. It was respectful, it was clear, and it was powerful because it was united. And Karen? She responded the only way she knew how. She showed up 2 weeks before the trial at the HOA clubhouse. Not for a meeting, for a press conference. She hadn't been seen in town since the fire, but there she was, standing on the steps in a charcoal gray suit, hair immaculate, voice steady as she read from a prepared statement into a row of microphones. She claimed the charges were politically motivated, that she was the victim of character assassination by disgruntled homeowners unwilling to respect structure. She said she acted within the full authority granted by the HOA bylaws, and that certain community members weaponized tragedy for their own agenda. And then, her final line. I look forward to clearing my name in court, and to restoring dignity to what was once Harmony Creek. It was classic Karen. Cold, calculated, and entirely lacking in accountability. But what shook me most wasn't her performance. It was the small crowd that clapped at the end. 4 people, 3 former board members, and 1 guy from across the street who once sued a neighbor over a weather vane. They were smiling, clapping, like she'd just announced her candidacy instead of her defense. It hit me then, something I hadn't allowed myself to consider. Karen didn't need a majority to matter. She just needed enough noise to plant doubt, to fracture unity, to slow down justice, and if she got even, one juror to wonder if the HOA residents were the real villains. She might not walk away innocent, but she could walk away free, and that terrified me, because we'd been fighting so long we'd forgotten. The system doesn't always reward truth. Sometimes it rewards confidence, and Karen had confidence in spades. But then something happened. Something small. Something human. After the press conference, Karen stepped down from the podium and turned to leave. Peaches and Prancer, her ever-faithful fluffballs, were waiting in a little carrier beside the sidewalk. She bent down to pick them up, and tripped, just a stumble. Her heel caught on the edge of the stone path. She didn't fall hard, just enough to rattle her composure. A few gasps, a flash from a local reporter's camera, and for a split second, she wasn't powerful, she wasn't regal, she was just a woman on the ground, startled, embarrassed, alone, and no one helped her up, not even her supporters. She stood on her own, brushing herself off quickly, face burning with fury. She barked something at her assistant, grabbed the dogs, and vanished. Into her car. I stood nearby, watching, and I saw it. The crack in the armor. The first real one. Because all the lawsuits, fines, and schemes aside, Karen's greatest weapon had always been the illusion of control. And now, finally, the cracks were showing. She'd lost the crowd. She'd lost the leash. Now the only question was, would the courtroom see the same thing? In the days leading to the trial, the energy around Harmony Creek changed again. Tense, but focused, no longer anxious, just ready. Ready to testify. Ready to tell the truth. Ready to end it. And the night before it all began, I sat outside under the porch light. The same porch where I'd once read her glossy newsletters and braced for impact. Dave joined me. No burgers this time. Just silence. Then he asked, "You think she'll go down for this?" I thought about it. About the fire. The boulders. The dogs. The flamingos. The fines, the neighbors who lived in fear, and the ones who stayed silent. I looked at him and said, I think she already has, because sometimes the fall doesn't come with bars or headlines. Sometimes it comes when no one claps anymore. When the only person cheering is you, and the only power you have left is in your head. Courtrooms don't look like they do in the movies. There's no echo when you walk in, no dramatic piano in the background, no gavel slamming just as someone screams, "Objection!" It's fluorescent lights, squeaky chairs, nervous scribbles on legal pads. People adjusting ties that already feel too tight. But that day, sitting in the gallery, watching Karen take her seat at the defense table, it still felt cinematic. Because after everything, the fines, the flamingos, the fire, she was finally here. Not behind a podium. Not above a neighborhood, just a defendant in a chair. And yet, she still sat like she owned the place. Chin high, jaw tight, Pomeranian brooch glinting like it was part of her armor. The trial began like most do, slow, opening statements, paperwork, exhibits, but then the testimony. That's when it changed. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke first. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She looked directly at the jury and said, "She made me feel like I didn't belong in my own home." Gerald went next. He read from his notes, at first, but halfway through he stopped. "I knew it was wrong," he said, "but I was scared, and that fear, that was her power. Not the bylaws, not the board. The fear." Others followed. Neighbors who'd never spoken up before. People fined for things that never made sense. The direction their welcome mat faced. The number of ceramic frogs in their garden. And with each story, each truth laid bare, the illusion cracked a little more. Karen's attorney did what they were paid to do. They questioned motives, suggested exaggeration, implied vendettas, but no one flinched, because what we had wasn't just documentation. It was consistency. The same fear, the same fines, the same fraud. And then came the evidence. Dave presented the financial timeline like a pro. Invoices, routing numbers, metadata. He even printed out the fake business, registration for Karen Pebble, and highlighted the matching post office box. It was devastating, but not just because it was thorough, because it was calm, measured. Truth doesn't need to shout when the facts are this loud. Karen didn't speak. Not during testimony. Not even when the judge asked if she wanted to make a statement. She just stared ahead, like if she looked at anyone, it might crack her open. The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated for 5 hours, and when they returned, the verdict came down with the quiet weight of inevitability. Guilty, fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of emergency services. The court recommended sentencing that included fines, restitution, and, pending a secondary hearing, possible jail time. The moment the verdict was read, Karen's expression didn't change. Not anger, not disbelief, just stillness. As if she'd known it all along. As if she'd played the final card and lost. But the moment that stayed with me, the moment that defined everything, happened right after. As court adjourned, people stood, shuffled out. Some hugged, some cried, and Karen turned around. For the first time since the fire, she looked directly at me, not with hatred, not with pride, with something else, resignation, and something just barely resembling remorse. She didn't speak, but her eyes held a question. Was this justice? I didn't nod, didn't shake my head. I just looked back, because that wasn't for me to answer. That was for her to carry now. Karen was sentenced to 18 months probation, community restitution, and a court-ordered financial audit. She avoided jail, but not consequences. The judge ordered her to repay every dollar taken. The HOA board used the funds to rebuild the damage her reign had left behind. Real lighting, real landscaping, real community projects. And Harmony Creek? It breathed like it hadn't in years. The fire station got a new water tank, courtesy of Karen's restitution. The yellow mailbox? Still there. Proud. Chipped paint and all. And whispering. Pines, it remained clear, always. Even Uncle Vince painted a flamingo in honor of the verdict, dressed it like a judge, labeled it Justice Honks. The day the sentencing paperwork was finalized, I sat again on my porch. Dave handed me a beer and said, "Well, that's it." "Is it?" I asked. He shrugged. "For her, maybe, but not for us." He was right. Because justice doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning, remembering. It means being brave enough to speak the next time before the fires. It means never giving one person that much power again. The HOA board restructured, added new protections, transparency requirements, rotating leadership. No more unchecked rulers, no more boulders. And one by one, the neighborhood began to bloom again. Laughter returned. Chalk drawings stretched across driveways, and no one got fined for wind chimes. Months later, I was walking my dog when I passed a moving truck. A young couple waved from the porch of Karen's old house. Now painted blue, they were planting sunflowers. The wife smiled. "Hi there." "We're new," I smiled back. "Welcome to Harmony Creek." She hesitated. "We heard about what happened here with the HOA?" I nodded. "Yeah, we've had our battles." She glanced at her husband, then back at me. "Is it safe now?" I thought about it. About everything, and I said, "It is now, because it was." Not because Karen was gone, but because we remembered what it felt like to be afraid, and we chose something better. We chose community, not compliance. We chose neighbors, not, enforcers. And most of all, we chose to never be silent again. That's how HOA stories end, not with gavel slams, but with wind chimes, with laughter on a lawn, with a man planting sunflowers where fear used to grow. Karen came to control, but Harmony Creek chose to heal. And sometimes, that's the greatest justice of all.